Across the country, provinces are moving forward with their own plans for reopening, but the province with the highest number of new cases, Quebec, has become a bit of an outlier, moving faster on some fronts than others. Premier François Legault addressed some of that criticism today.
If we stop our efforts and the situation doesn't improve in Montreal, I won't hesitate to push back the reopening.
So how much of a political gamble is this for Quebec? It's Thursday, and I'm here with that issue. Chantal Hébert is in Montreal, Andrew Coyne is in Toronto, and Althea Raj here in Ottawa, all of them working from their homes. Okay, I did want to talk about Quebec because I understand, I hear what the Premier says every day. I certainly understand that there are different restrictions outside of Montreal rather than inside Montreal, which is really the epicenter for the province, certainly. But I'm still not sure whether this is too big a health risk, as his own public health officer says. It's a bit of a gamble, or whether this is really a big political risk for him. So I'll start with you, Chantal, because you are in Montreal.
It's both. François Legault has earned top scores for approval over his handling of the crisis, and he still enjoys, I believe, the confidence of the vast majority of Quebecers. But you have to be careful to take him at his word, as in Quebec may be moving fast, but it has not moved yet.
Yes.
And that has been made really clear. It will always be something of a gamble to decide when you do jump in that water that is reopening. And it is a fact that beyond the numbers, outside Montreal, the pandemic is very much under control. And in Montreal, the hotspots really are centered on old age homes and long-term care homes. So where we will be when Montreal is supposed to really open up with schools on May 19th, that's still some ways down. You've seen how this situation has changed. That's a big question mark, but for sure, Premier Legault has a lot of capital, and he's put a hell of a lot of it on the table on this.
And the Prime Minister, Andrew, has been asked about it all through the week, and very reluctant, in part because it is Quebec, but maybe it would be with any province, to criticize or say anything about the approach that Quebec has taken. Is there anything he can do or say in this instance if we get 2 weeks down the road and it doesn't look like it's the right time?
He's got relatively few levers, and most of this is within provincial jurisdiction, and he wants to preserve, I think, capital with the provinces, with the premiers, to continue the kind of cooperation and collaboration that I think we have been seeing a fair bit of through this crisis, and that's a great asset for the country. It does have implications for neighboring provinces if one province or another has a renewed outbreak, because unless we're going to absolutely continue to keep the border sealed between the provinces, which is not good for the health of the federation or the economy, then you could see people migrating from one province to another and causing problems for the neighboring provinces. Some risk is permissible in this. It was worth it to shut down the economy to prevent an out-of-control outbreak that would have killed tens of thousands. It's not worth it to keep it closed to get the caseload down to zero. We just want to make sure we keep it manageable. The question is whether this is a smart risk. And I think the remaining item for concern is we do not have the testing capacity as of yet to be able to do what all the experts say we have to do, which is to be able to pounce on every case that crops up in future. So unless we get that kind of testing capacity, this is really pushing the envelope.
What do you think, Althea? Is this a risk? I mean, not only from a public health perspective, but as we talked about, a political perspective here for the Quebec Premier.
Yeah, one wonders if there was a discussion about having hard targets, if the federal government wanted to have hard targets in its guidelines that it established and released this week, and whether there was pushback from the provinces to not have those targets that Andrew, for example, is talking about. I think the risks exist for every provincial premier that opens. I mean, the provincial premiers have been front and center to this, to the pandemic response. And so if it goes badly, they will for sure wear it. I think what's important to stress is that Premier Legault, like frankly every other provincial premier, has said very clearly that they're taking baby steps. And if anything pops up, then they're they're ready and they're willing to go back a few steps, not just hit the pause button, but reverse decisions and go back to full lockdown. And fingers crossed that we don't go there, but there are a few things I think that will be helpful, I think, when everyone starts to move at their own pace. Right now, it's very confusing. You know, one day we're told, stay indoors, this is what everybody is asking you to do. And then in British Columbia, the health officer tells us, oh no, actually it's great, go outside. The risk of catching something from somebody biking by you or jogging next to you is very minimal. Please go take some air. I think that it's going to be really important for people to know why decisions are happening, what the risk is, why can they go to the barber shop, but they can't go to the movie theater.
Yeah.
And the easing of interprovincial movement is going to be really important, that is very well coordinated. And for example, Quebec and Ontario, we already know that the border is not going to be reopening tomorrow, for example.
Yeah. Chantal, you went in there. Go ahead.
2 points. I think possibly Ontario, other provinces are not unhappy to see the Premier with the most political capital test the water to see what happens, because the political risk is actually real. But the other reality that one has to acknowledge, and you don't need to be a public health expert at this point to have realized it, is that public health experts will have different opinions. And that will also be true of chief medical officers in a variety of provinces or cities, since you live in Ottawa, and a lot of us have been looking and wonder sometimes at some of the instructions given in Ottawa. So it's not as if there is a body of this is the right book that every medical officer subscribes to in every province. And people are going to have to accept that, because we are in unexplored territory. No, under a tree, you're not going to find the right book to follow.
Yeah, that does.
But
perhaps,
I think there's a risk tolerance
ahead,
that, you know, like, for example, Premier Legault today talking about how there are 44,000 COVID cases in long-term homes in the province. And basically just telling the population, brace for it. More people are going to die. There will be many, many, many more deaths, is what he told people. Like, that maybe is tolerable for Quebecers, but maybe, you know, it would not be so tolerable for Newfoundlanders. I don't know, but I think that there is a regional difference, and people have different stocks. Different provincial leaders have the ability to say certain things that others do not.
I'll let Chantal respond, and then I'll get Andrew to wrap it up. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay,
Chantal.
let's be real. The way that people heard Premier Legault on this today was not, I'm allowing people to die. It was that this is happening and these people will probably not be saved, which is a very different proposition. It's not a tolerance issue. It's an information issue. This is happening to older people, and it's going to be very hard to reverse that curve in those settings.
But I will say, Andrew, and I'll get you to respond, that Dr. Tam actually this week said, when asked about Quebec, there will be different tolerance for risk across the country, not particularly in Quebec or another place, but it is up to people to mitigate that, how far they're willing to push themselves and their population. Andrew.
Yeah, there is actually some polling data that suggests Quebecers are a bit more tolerant of opening up a little sooner than other provinces, and that may be part of the political mix as well. And the need to take some chances is apparent, because the cost of the economy is absolutely extraordinary, and we're finding out new data on that every day. That being said, if it's a choice between going a little bit slower and doing the testing versus going a little bit faster and having to take them back, having to put the controls back on, I would go for the former. The cost in terms of public morale and business confidence of having to reimpose controls after they've been taken off, I think would be enormous.
All right, let's move on to a topic we haven't talked about in a very long time, it seems, the Conservative leadership race. It is back on after being paused because of the pandemic. 4 candidates, just a reminder, are running to replace Andrew Scheer. And we now know that members will vote by mail-in ballots only by August 21st. So what do we make of how the party has decided this, the fact that they've decided it's time to get going again? I'll start with you, Althea.
Well, to me, the main takeaway is that they decided, strangely to me, not to push back the membership cutoff date. So the membership cutoff date is still going to be May 15th. So even though the campaign was paused for basically a month, they're not going to allow candidates to go out and sell more memberships to try to expand the Conservative tent. They're going to keep that deadline that's only in 2 weeks. We haven't even had a leadership debate. Not even one debate has happened. And then once the membership cutoff is done, then basically they're just picking from the same, sending as many emails as they possibly can, as many virtual Zoom casts and teleconference that they can organize, and then possibly hitting the summer barbecue circuit while people start mailing in their preferential ballots.
So what does that tell us, I wonder, about about maybe how decided this race actually is, if there's no more opportunity to build, to grow the tent, as Althea says? I'll get you to go, Chantal.
I'm not sure that it is decided, to tell you the truth. I'm not sure that the pause was really good for Peter MacKay, who was and seems to remain the perceived frontrunner. But if we're going to do main takeaways, my main takeaway is that they may not agree on the way forward or who should lead them, but there seems to be a consensus, at least in the back rooms of that party, that it is time to turn the page on Andrew Scheer's leadership.
Yeah, and certainly in the...
Wasn't that decided months ago?
It was, but it almost seemed like he was trying to step up again, and it does seem as though in public opinion polls too, his approval ratings have dropped a lot. I mean, Jagmeet Singh's have too, to be fair, but Andrew Scheer's have, and perhaps that is worrying to the party. Andrew?
Well, I'm sure they'd like to turn the page on Andrew Scheer's leadership, but I'm not sure that they are aware of how much else has changed. I mean, this leadership race began in a very different world, with very different issues, with very different stakes. At that time, the Liberals were in a lot of trouble. They were behind the Tories in the polls. The issues that we were debating were relatively small, certainly compared to what we're at now.
Sure.
And maybe at that time, you might say, let's stick with a very safe choice, Peter MacKay and Aaron O'Toole. Let's not have the kind of far-reaching debate that people like me were urging them on. Now you're in a climate where this country is in a major, major economic crisis. Leave aside the health crisis that we're trying to battle our way out of, but we've got issues facing us now that we haven't seen in decades. And it's really dispiriting to see the 4 candidates that remain in this race. It's as I say, it seems like from another time. So they may come to regret their haste in trying to carry on with this continuing race. I don't know how they're going to do it in the midst of the lockdowns being gradually eased in various provinces. It's going to hamper their ability to campaign. I think you could easily have somebody replace Andrew Scheer on an interim basis, but whether they need to press forward with this race at this time with this field of candidates, I think is really a question.
That's interesting. I hadn't really thought about how much has changed and whether, in fact, that the slate of candidates that was there before and is still there now and can't grow is actually the right answer to the Canada that we will end up with at the end of this, or by the end of the summer even.
We're about to have a massive...
Andrew, then Chantal, yep.
We're about to have a massive philosophical debate in this country coming out of this crisis about what we want to, where we want to go. Do we want to roll back this enormous increase in government spending and government activism that's come out of this crisis, or do we want to is this going to be some kind of new normal? Maybe not in exactly the same form as during the crisis, but there's a lot of people who say this is a time for a rethink of the role of government. If the Conservatives, if the best they can put forward is their standard bearer in that debate, when they're coming at it 9-10 points behind the polls, is a Peter MacKay or an Aaron O'Toole, God forbid, Derek Sloan. That doesn't speak well of where the party is at.
Okay, Chantal, then Althea, then I got to wrap it up.
I don't think that there is anyone at this point with the heft and the moral authority to say times have changed and we need to, turn the clock back. I think by now the party's a mess. The caucus, everyone is divided. Certainly Scheer is very little authority left on his caucus. And then how many, by then they probably think that a minority government is a good thing because they can throw away another leader and then get serious again.
Yeesh. Althea?
Well, I think it's too early to tell how Aaron O'Toole and Peter MacKay are going to take a political advantage of the opportunity they have to perhaps put forward a grander vision than they have thus far. What we've seen from Aaron O'Toole is basically Canada and China should not be so close, and we need to move on with Canadian manufacturing. From Peter MacKay, we've also seen the manufacturing angle, but we've seen a more pan-Canadian, his editorial in The Sun about sort of the good that has come out of Canadians working together during this pandemic. I think that they have an opportunity here to speak to the country and not just a very narrow conservative base. But I worry that because the membership deadline is so close, and then those are the only people they will have a benefit to talking, that we're going to have more emails like Aaron O'Toole saying that how outraged he is that the police were thinking about charging church leaders for having an outdoor church service, because obviously he wants to win second ballot support from Derek Sloan and Leslyn Lewis, who are social conservatives, and that part of the party is a third of the votes, and they will matter.
Okay. You guys, really interesting comments there. I appreciate it. We'll see you next week.